Come, let us explore why monks are rejecting this popular meditation method. Together as a team, let us relaxingly recite. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. This includes humanity, even those who fancy themselves teachers of meditation. Oopsie. According to some, Gautama, who was known as the Buddha, good morning, Shivi, was rather flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, lucid, egalitarian, cooperative, and kind. This is why many people are enthusiastic to emulate his example. Many people, that is, other than his foolish cousin Devadatta. What was he like? Devadatta was rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, cryptic, elitist, competitive, and cruel. Gautama's path could be described by many terms, including yin, or spiritual matriarchy, Devadatta's as yang, or religious patriarchy. Statistically, the majority of meditation teachers unwittingly follow in the footsteps of the Buddha's foolish cousin. Therefore, it could come as a little surprise that these individuals implore their students to actively focus and analyze. Please forgive the rhyme. They might even use labels like analysis, contemplation, vipassana, samatha, concentration, focus, or even mindfulness, even though that final term is often woefully misapplied. The only way to practice either active focus or active analysis, or both, is to rely upon discrete neural pathways such as those found in our medial prefrontal cortex or our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Overuse of such regions could exhaust our prefrontal cortex, triggering our amygdala, the seat of anxiety and aggression. This is clearly antithetical to the peace and love that lure us into what we hope is the Buddha's path of meditation. Far better it is to practice mindfulness and meditation in reliance upon the two branches of our autonomic nervous system. For doing so could calm the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala, as well as excite the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus. With consistency, it could even cause our choices, utterances, and deeds to habitually flow from the right or effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. This is why the Buddha taught mindfulness and meditation. Having completed our opening lesson, let's shift gears. It is Qui-Gon Jinn Tuesday morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I have harnessed my autistic special interests as well as my ADHD hyperfocus to spend about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that I can become your nerdy, neurodivergent guide to nirvana. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Having finished the housekeeping, we turn our attention to the latest iteration a very easy meditation practice text, or sadhana, if you're nasty. Let us relaxingly recite. Whatever comes, may all beings notice, relax, and flow. Whatever stays, may all beings notice, relax, and flow. Whatever goes, may all beings notice, relax, and flow. Excuse me. Whoops. Upon the tip of our left index finger, we could rest the great knuckle at the base of our right index finger, palms up in our lap. Working with our index fingers could gently invite our real or imagined subtle energies to automatically coalesce at the crown region of our head. Now let us briefly review how mindfulness works. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are wired by evolution to automatically access the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord. This sympathetic nervous system has evolved to help us notice in a very special way, to help us notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. This, as you can tell, is the polar opposite of the rigidity and controlling tendencies we see in concentration. Let us turn our attention now to meditation. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the parasympathetic nervous system divided between the lower third as well as the upper third of that same spinal cord. This parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. So if we already have this standard factory-issued equipment, why do we practice mindfulness and meditation? Because most of the time, most of us are living in opposition to this healing autonomic nervous system. How do we cooperate with it? By silently and mentally reciting the verb noticing during each inhalation, and by silently and mentally reciting the verb relaxing during each exhalation. Remember, the moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation or Buddhist philosophy, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window. And now together as a team, let's practice. Welcome to the second quarter of this morning's live stream. Let us relaxingly recite an excerpt from the vast expanse of the diamond-like mind, the source text, a text which is considered to be the source of all legitimate or authentic Dzogchen teachings. This was written about 14 centuries ago by the Buddhist, what do you call it? There's a special adjective. Reformer, by the Buddhist reformer Prahe Vajra. This was translated from the Tibetan by Chogyal Namkhai Norbu. This was translated from the Italian by Adriano Clemente. This has been adapted and amplified by yours truly. Because while I am not an expert on Dzogchen, I probably speak English better than someone who was raised in Italy. Just as someone who was raised in Italy would speak Italian better than myself. Go figure. Control G, here we go. Let us relaxingly recite 4 repetitions of this passage. The great elements are the Bhagavan, boss-like dynamism, such as solid yet void, that exist by nature in all things. However misunderstood it may initially be, liberation originates from oneself and not elsewhere. Okay, let's explore this. In the words of South Park, what? So this was written quite a long time ago. And back then, people thought about the elements in terms of 4 elements or 5 elements, depending upon which cultural system you were exposed to. Now, and in another great Buddhist reformer named Nagarjuna taught that there were 2 truths, and they're both equal in importance. This is the truth we perceive when we breathe in, called mindfulness, and the truth we perceive when we breathe out, called meditation. Just as a bird requires both its wings to take to the skies, we need both mindfulness and meditation. So he explained it this way. In terms of the great elements, we could experience dynamism yet voidness. We can experience solidity yet emptiness. We could experience moisture yet emptiness. We could experience warmth yet emptiness. We could experience spaciousness yet non-graspability. So I've said all that to say this. Each of us, because of the dynamism of our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, we're already wired to notice the 2 truths of our own body, the 2 truths of solidity yet non-graspability. All we need to do is get out of our own way, and then this point is continued. After being indoctrinated for 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, it's understandable that when we first sit in mindfulness meditation, we might be confused about a good many things. That's not a roadblock. According to the Buddha, who had students of all sexual permutations, all castes, and all ages, one could master the Eightfold Path. One could master the techniques of enlightenment in as little as a week. Therefore, one need not the blind, superstitious faith. One need not squander decades acquiring performing the mental gymnastics necessary to earn a PhD. If one simply notices in harmony with one's inhalation, if one simply relaxes in harmony with one's exhalation, liberation from the tyranny of our survival drives becomes an inevitability. Let's recite. The great elements are the Bhagavan boss-like dynamism such as solid yet void that exist by nature in all things. However misunderstood it may initially be, liberation originates from oneself and not elsewhere. We need not go on a pilgrimage to a sacred site. We need not worship a crusty old teacher. We do not need a secret handshake. We do not need to spend thousands of dollars to learn a secret syllable from a con man. We just cooperate with our body. Enlightenment is an inevitability. Sadly, most of us were raised and conditioned to fight our bodies. That path of fighting our bodies could take us many places. Sadly, Nirvana is not one of them. Let us continue. The great elements are the Bhagavan, boss-like dynamism such as solid yet void that exist by nature in all things. However misunderstood it may initially be, liberation originates from oneself and not elsewhere. Who can forget the words of Stuart Smalley way back in the 90s? I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. The great elements are the Bhagavan, boss-like dynamism such as solid yet void that exist by nature in all things. However misunderstood it may initially be, liberation originates from oneself and not elsewhere. Whoops. Upon the tip of our left little finger, we could rest the great knuckle, we could rest the great knuckle at the base of our right little finger, palms up in our laps. So working with our little fingers and knuckles, we could gently invite our real or imagined subtle energies to automatically coalesce at the bladder region of our lower abdomen. Let us review mindfulness. Every time we inhale, thanks to our sympathetic nervous system, we are wired to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice mind's antics of perception, emotion, intention, cognition, recollection, and imagination. Now let us review meditation. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system, we are wired to physically relax as well as mentally release. All we need to do is cooperate. All we need to do is to stop fighting against our autonomic nervous system. One of the most efficient ways to do that is to silently and mentally recite the verb noticing during each inhalation, as well as silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing during each exhalation. Let us relaxingly recite 4 repetitions of this 5th passage. Great wisdom could seem difficult to find. It is realized through wisdom and method. Though it could be said to depend on something else, real bliss originates from oneself. So, if it seems like the author is beating a dead horse, he is! Metaphorically speaking, of course. The wisdom and method here is simple. It's noticing vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly during our inhalation, and physically relaxing as well as mentally releasing in harmony with our exhalation. That's it. Many people seek bliss. We are natural-born hedonists. We are wired, thanks to our dopamine, to seek the pleasure of survival, to seek the pleasure of reproduction, to seek the pleasure of water when we're thirsty, shade when we're hot, fire when we're cold, rest when we're weary, food when we're hungry. This hedonistic dopamine cycle has kept our species alive for a very long time. So we are bliss-seeking machines. Addiction is nothing more than a dysfunction of our dopamine system. It's not a moral failing. It's not a lack of wisdom. It's a neurological disorder with behavioral symptoms. That's all. The cheapest and most reliable source of the bliss that we hunger for is simply the method and wisdom of an awareness and release in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. Together. Great wisdom can seem difficult to find. It is realized through wisdom and method. Though it can be said to depend on something else, real bliss originates from oneself. Quick edit. The wisdom here is a reference to the wisdom of letting go. Great wisdom can seem difficult to find. It is realized through method and wisdom. Though it could be said to depend on something else, real bliss originates from oneself. So some people seek bliss through worship, through bowing or singing or making offerings. But according to the author of this text, the source of bliss that is most conducive to ease and convenience and enlightenment and freedom from the tyranny of duality is method and wisdom. Let's continue. Great wisdom can seem difficult to find. It is realized through method and wisdom. Though it could be said to depend on something else, real bliss originates from oneself. Upon the tip of our left middle finger, we could rest the great knuckle at the base of our right middle finger, palms up in our lap. Thus, working with our middle knuckle and finger, we could gently invite our real or imagined subtle energies to automatically coalesce at the heart region of our chest. Let us review mindfulness. Every time we inhale, thanks to our sympathetic nervous system, we could vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all manner of phenomena. From the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Now let us review meditation. Every time we exhale, and thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system, we are already wired for physical relaxation and mental release. We are wired for these things, but we have developed the habit of living in resistance to them. However, the easiest way to harmonize ourselves with the factory settings of our autonomic nervous system is to silently and mentally recite the verb noticing during each inhalation, and silently and as well as mentally recite the verb relaxing during each exhalation. Welcome to the final quarter of this morning's live stream. In the days and weeks that follow, there's a distinct possibility that this morning live stream might occur earlier and earlier. You'll most likely receive notifications through YouTube if that's the case. Let us relaxingly recite 4 repetitions of this 6th passage. The great miracle is not difficult. All qualities and capacities immediately arise from oneself. Through the understanding of the authentic condition. Now, authentic condition is used many ways, and that's not uncommon. Open a dictionary and you will find multiple definitions of the same word. As always, ask an English teacher. They'll tell you typically context is the key to determining the meaning of the word in question. So great miracle here is a synonym for enlightenment. What is enlightenment? The liberation Buddha offers us is not liberation from the presence of our survival drives. They are necessary. It's liberation from the tyranny of those survival drives. Enlightenment, therefore, is nothing other than mastery of the Buddha's eightfold path. Mastery does not mean we cease to experience certain things. It simply means we've gotten so good at certain techniques that we can practice them spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. According to the Buddha, that could be accomplished in as little as 7 days. Now, in Tantric Buddhism, we talk about the great and the mundane accomplishments. The great accomplishment is enlightenment. The mundane accomplishments would be the parlor tricks, being able to pacify obstacles, being able to increase blessings, being able to essentially perform the Jedi mind trick to a certain degree or not, and the ability to perform exorcisms. Now, whether these 4 powers are literal or most likely metaphoric, here's the point. We don't need to worship and supplicate and make offerings and invocations to Dharma protectors or wealth deities. All we need to do is continue practicing mindfulness and meditation in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. We cannot help but notice that which troubles us, whether that which troubles us is present or merely potential. We cannot help but notice our desires. We don't have to create a vision board. We don't have to concentrate. We can just allow the workings of our mind to cause dreads and desires to randomly grungeate across the stage of our mind. The universal response to whatever we perceive is simply to physically relax and mentally release in harmony with our exhalation. According to the author, that's the key, not only to enlightenment, as if that wasn't enough, but the meeting of our mundane needs and the meeting of the mundane needs of others. This is not just annihilating our dreads and desires, but harnessing our dreads and desires. Anthropologists tell us that as we transitioned from the Paleolithic into the Neolithic era, because it was a transition, it wasn't just whammo overnight, we began domesticating beasties, typically herbivores, Not all, just a very, very small percentage. And instead of having oxen or cattle tear up our crops, we would put a bit in their mouth, a bridle over their heads. We would fasten them, put a collar over their shoulders, fasten them to a plow, and put them to work. Now, I'm not a big fan of animal exploitation. I'm a uh, annoying vegan, but we can similarly harness. I'm sorry, I'm watching my neighbor back at do acrobatics with the car. Um, we can similarly harness or domesticate the random dreads and desires through the dynamo, through the mechanism of simply noticing and relaxing, which is astounding. There have been times in my head, as someone who's really disabled and really at the mercy of others' charity, there have been times in my life where I've been faced with the specter of homelessness. And in those circumstances, I typically relied on the 21 invocations of Tada, or the 20 or the praises of the 21 Tadas, depending upon which translation you prefer. And it kept me, whether by coincidence or causality, it kept me off the streets. I was able to find shelter and clothing and food. Um, but it always felt like slavery. It felt like I was on my knees before a real or imagined celestial entity, begging for scraps, paying for those scraps with my time and what little energy I had as a disabled person. And deep, deep down, I intuited there must be a better way. So imagine my delight when, after decades of study and practice, um, good fortune brought me to this foundational text of Dzogchen. Since I've been exposed to it, it has revolutionized my practice of the path. And right now, in America, in the United States, in the United Corporations of America, uh, there is a slow motion coup in process, and it's very, very scary. They're talking about putting people with disabilities in prison camps. Very, very scary stuff. Um, and I get to feel the full spectrum of human emotions. But this time, instead of relying upon supernatural invocations that are the jurisdiction of Mahayoga, I'm going to rely upon simply the awareness and release of Ati Yoga, mindfulness and meditation, the seventh and eighth folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. And so, my friends, I do not uh, pontificate from the lofty spire of an ivory tower. Um, I'm just as vulnerable and as you, in some areas, maybe more so. And so, when I share this with you, it's not from a place of platitude or theory, but of survival. And it seems to me that if one is to look at the sacred, so-called sacred texts of other religions, for instance, the sacred text of the Christians, the so-called New Testament, one could read in the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, the love chapter, that the highest love is not one of devotion, but one of empathy towards one's fellows. And that puts me in remembrance of animal husbandry, of all things. Yes, yes, bear with me. Consider the life cycle of a cow. A cow was born a helpless calf. It stays by its mother's side for two reasons. One, the udders keep it fed, and two, the mother's horns keep it protected from predators. Predators for whom a calf would be easy prey, easy pickings. However, as days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, the calf stops suckling, the calf starts eating grass, the calf grows into a tween and then an adolescent, and then whammo. All of a sudden they have their own udders, they have their own horns. They are fully adapted to eating grass. Puberty hits and they're really interested in reproduction. Their devotion from their mother is replaced with empathy for the rest of the herd. We see this in the entirety of the mammalian animal kingdom. Same with humans. What was noted in 1 Corinthians 13 is that the more our devotion is a vertical phenomena to a real or imagined celestial parent, the more we will forever remain children. The mark of maturation is replacing vertical devotion with horizontal empathy for our fellows. Thus, in Buddhism, we've talked previously about Mahayoga, Anuyoga, and Ati Yoga, relying upon ritual, relying upon energy, or relying upon meditation. And that the highest practice is just to rely on meditation. While invoking the 21 Tattas is devotion, it's ritual. And while potent, it's expensive. It's like we're putting our spiritual growth on hold to take care of this physical need. But we are called to follow the example of the real or archetypical Buddha, who was willing to gamble with his very survival to discover and master and then share the path. So I say to you, as one on the precipice of peril, that the greatest magic is non-dual and spontaneous awareness and release. I remember going into a magic shop, magic with a K, way back in the 90s, speaking to a lovely clerk. And she explained to me that the lowest witch relies on ritual, and that the highest witch relies only on their mind. And so we see a parallel in the Wiccan community, in the Christian community, and in the Buddhist community, that there is a striation of practice. There are those who are governed by fear and petulance, and those who might feel fear are not governed by it. They are governed by wisdom and love. After decades of study and practice, I would say go with wisdom and love. Upon the tip of our left ring finger, we can rest the great knuckle of our right ring finger, palms up in our lap. Thus, working with our ring, fingers, and knuckles, we gently invite our real or imagined subtle energies to automatically coalesce at the navel region of our mid-abdomen. Which is the key to mindfulness. Every time we inhale, thanks to our sympathetic nervous system, we are wired to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice dualities, such as dread and desire, danger and safety, lack and boon, pain and pleasure, scorn and praise, shame and fame. Excuse me. What is the key to meditation? Every time we exhale, thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system, we're wired for physical relaxation and mental release. What is the most efficient way to stop resisting this enlightening process of our autonomic nervous system? To silently and mentally recite noticing and relaxing in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. Let's practice together right now. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 9 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.